And
Yes.
then we'll go around the room.
Okay. I just wanted to welcome everybody. I am the outgoing chair of SVAC, Denise Loffman, and Lisa is going to be taking over this year. And so I'm really grateful to have her stepping into the role. I wanted to welcome all really long-term and new members to SVAC, and thank you all for a number of years of, it's been a true pleasure to lead this group and to move us forward. So thank you all. And yeah, looking forward to today. Thanks, Lisa.
So let's just go around the room and introduce ourselves. I'm Lisa High. I'm from Astoria, and I represent non-motorized use.
Greg Jacob from Tigard area, and I'm the environmental representative.
Amanda Sullivan Astor, certified forester. I'm the forest policy manager for Associated Oregon Loggers and on staff representing operators.
I'm Barrett Brown. I represent motorized recreation and other recreation communities from the North Plains.
Lisa Phipps, I represent the conservation side, which is 1,000 billion different people with different perspectives. So I'm just one, but that's why we're here today.
Good morning, I'm Joe Offer. I serve as the Recreation Education Interpretation Program Manager for the State Forest in the Northwest area.
Good morning, Don Everingham, Northwest Oregon Area Director and co-convener of SVAC.
Jody Crew, State Forest Distribution Official. Morning, everyone. Colleen Kaiser, the Planning and Operations Manager.
Nick Powell, I'm the Deputy Chief of State Forest and co-convener of SVAC.
Ty Koppel, Boise Cascade.
Morning, Cody Valencia. I'm the State Forest Unit Forester for the West Oregon District.
Morning, everyone. I'm Eric Perkins, newly hired District Forester in Forest Grove.
Morning all, my name is Kevin Haas. I'm the business team leader in Salem State Forest, but I'm here today as the acting asset unit manager, acting for Kevin Boyd.
Morning all, Dan Goody, Astoria District Forester.
Morning, Virginia Ward, State Forest Trust of Oregon.
Morning, Paul Rep, growth, recreational trail manager. Morning, I'm Ben Burns, the recreation facilities manager.
Next up from the District Operations Coordinator.
Thank you. We'll go to the online.
All right, yeah, on the screen, I think we'll start with our SVAC members. So Denise introduced herself already this morning. So next we'll go to Susan.
Good morning. I'm Susan Knutson-Overmeyer. I'm non-affiliated.
Thank you. Cheryl?
Did you say Cheryl?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. I'm with Ivy Frog in the southern part of the state, and I'm unaffiliated member of SVAC.
Thank you. Dan?
Morning, everybody. I'm Dan Stark, Forestry and Natural Resources Extension Agent for Oregon State University. I cover Clatsop, Tillamook, and Lincoln counties. Good morning.
Morning. Mike? Oh, you muted.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for that reminder there, Dawn. That mute thing gets the old people all the time. But Mike Tody, I'm with the Oregon Hunters Association, and here's a recreation rep.
Thank you. Leslie?
Hi, everybody. Unaffiliated.
Morning. Okay, Brad?
Morning, everyone. Brad Catton, Astoria District Operations Coordinator.
Thanks, Brad. Vanessa?
Morning, everyone. Vanessa Petro, lead wildlife biologist for State Forest Division.
Right. Matt Dawson?
Morning, Matt Gostin, wildlife biologist for ODF.
Hey, morning, Justin.
Morning, Justin Buttress, policy analyst for State Forest.
Thank you. Steph?
Morning, everyone. Steph Beal, Operations Coordinator for Forest Grove District.
Morning, Eric.
Good morning, Eric Moberly, Aquatic and Riparian Specialist for State Forest.
Right, Nancy Lanyon. Okay, and once that scrolls down in control. Anybody else that I may have missed? Okay. Covers introductions. Yeah.
You wanna? give me-
Yes, okay, so good morning all. The first meeting of 2026, and so I'm gonna spend a little time, maybe talk about our membership roster. Also talk about our new member orientation packet we're working towards, as well as touch on the charter for just a minute. So yeah, thank you, Lisa, for assuming chair and welcome. Looking forward to another really good year. Ultimately kind of instituted over the last 2 years, Denise, after we had finished the previous year, had noted it would be really great to get together and really chart the path for SFAC and plan out our future years. We did that 2 years ago and ultimately saw the value of that throughout last year. And ultimately, we did that again this year. So whether that was late January or early February, Denise, Lisa, myself, Nick, Colleen were able to get together and look at topics that we hope to bring to SFAC, items that the agency is looking for some input on and chart the path for the year. So with that, we codified the schedule for the upcoming year. So 3 meetings that aligns with what we have in our charter. We've got the March meeting here today. We've got a 2-day meeting and tour in May, which will be located in Forest Grove. And then from there, we'll have our October meeting and we'll have that at the ODF Salem headquarters. Kind of moving towards the membership, and again, to get everybody grounded, our last meeting was last October. Ultimately, certain individuals' terms expired. Those that expired at the end of last year were both Barrett and Denise. And they have both agreed to continue to participate and stay on, which we're grateful for. Ultimately, we've got 14 slots for SFAC members, and we currently have 13 of them filled. So we still continue to have our tribal position vacant and are working with our tribal liaison to engage the tribes to see what that future membership could look like. But there's still some more work to do there. The other change to note, we do have a new commissioner represented on the committee, and that will be Commissioner Baines from Clatsop County. So Margaret Magruder has stepped down, and so FTLAC appoints a commissioner rep, and that will be Commissioner Baines. She's got other scheduling conflicts, and so she's going to join us today virtually, I believe, at about 10:30. So just wanted to note that for the group as a whole as well. As I had noted, working on developing a new member orientation packet to include key information, links, and really help onboard new members, probably in a much more thorough and professional way that we have many of you that have joined recently. So That has continued to be a work in progress. It's a little bit challenging in that some of our, and when I talk about the charter and the transitions, the new forest management plan, some of that stuff is a little bit dated. And so working to update that material as well as our SBAC committee member page on the ODF website as well. So hope to get that packet finalized and again, we'll distribute it out to the entire committee prior to the next meeting. I did learn that there's actually some required training that committee members are supposed to take. And other committee members have, but we've never instituted that on us. Just note, there's a piece there as well. You know, we've talked about the SFAC charter and looking at what the right time is to update that. Again, the current one is strictly focused, as I touch on some of it, the Northwest Oregon State Forest Management Plan, and knowing that the division is working to make that transition. You know, the previous charter was very focused geographically into the Northwest Oregon area, and we've worked to expand committee membership and ultimately want to reflect that through the charter as well. The majority of the members serve 3-year terms. We do have a few folks that are standing membership. So Dan and OSU Extension is a standing member noted there on the committee. And Amanda as well, Forest Operators, is a standing committee member there. And the reason I note that, and we've tried to work to kind of stagger the terms on the committee, but when I look at 2026 and the terms expiring at the end of this year, we actually have 5 of the 13 committee members' terms expire at the end of this year. So ultimately, over a third of the committee. So that would be Susan's term, Greg Jacob, Lisa Phipps, Cheryl, and Leslie Shaw. So as I think about that, I think about the transition and the work that the division's doing with the forest management plan. I do feel like by the end of this year, with a third of the committee expiring term limits, this would be a good opportunity for us to validate the membership, to look potential what additions or changes we would want to see for the committee, to then update the charter to reflect, you know, the true objectives of the committee moving forward. So I do see us working to complete that work and roll that out at the beginning of next year. Again, with that said, though, just wanted to, again, as we kick off a new year, so looking at the current charter, and I'm not going to share my screen here, but I'm just going to read. So the goal of the State Forest Advisory Committee to assist ODF in successfully implementing the Northwest Oregon State Forest Management Plan through improving the quality of our planning decisions, enhancing our efficiency and effectiveness, and building a broad level of understanding, acceptance, and support for the forest management plan. The objectives of the committee: provide advice and guidance to ODF as it relates to the implementation of the forest management plan and the management of state forests. A key assumption for us: public involvement significantly enhances the quality of ODF's operational planning, implementation, and adaptive management decisions. As far as who's a customer for the committee serves to provide advice to ODF. The general public may also benefit from the committee's participation with and contributions to the agency. Scope and priority, the committee will focus primarily on the forest management plans, the implementation plans, and the individual districts and their annual operations plans and proposed management activities. We actually have a task and a timeline. A work plan will be established by the committee on an annual basis in collaboration with the department. And I do feel like we've met that objective by meeting with the chair and vice chair the last 2 years to ultimately outline the future path for our meetings. And decision-making processes and committee actions. Just wanted to highlight the notice states here, the principal value of SVAC to ODF is to provide a sounding board for proposed or planned actions and decisions. In this context, ODF gains value in the viewpoints or diverse interests and individuals and from the synergy or thoughts and ideas that is created through the committee discussions. So with that, that again, want to kind of set the stage for another good and productive year. And then the other kind of business item to note here with that transition of Lisa into the chair position, we also need to go through the process to nominate another vice chair moving forward. So as I look at the agenda, is this the appropriate time that we do that, Nick? And we've got Nick sought some advice from Justin on how we're to do that.
Yeah, so, yeah, exactly. So I had Justin go back and look at it to make sure, we're in the right place and what the actual rules are. Pretty straightforward. So we just need a quorum, a simple majority to be able to vote. And then it's just a simple majority to see who is the successful candidate. The one caveat is no secret ballots are allowed. So we can discuss how we want to do this. Is it by ballot? Is it ayes or hands? Ayes and nays or hands. We should solicit nominations, but I'll also say so the previous Amanda was nominated and ultimately Lisa was the vice chair. And so we talked to Amanda agreed she'd be willing again to be vice chair. So I guess the question first is, do we have any other nominees? And I think you can self-nominate or nominate others. Right? So
do I have a second for the nomination of Amanda?
So moved.
So moved. And shall we vote? All those that say aye, aye. Aye. Those that say nay, nay. That goes for you all on the online. And
Aye.
I abstain.
okay. Leslie, did you say yea or nay? So.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think we've got a new vice chair. I show that we've got 11 out of the 13 SVAC members here present at the meeting. So thank you for your participation. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Congrats. Thank you.
Going back to your the charter document there, I'm not sure how much or if any of that was revised in your last recent discussions, but it'd be great to send that out again to committee members and have folks put it in their hello at night for a couple times, because I think it reads very well, and it encapsulates a lot of lessons learned, and so it's great to hear it out loud again.
Yep, thank you, Barrett. I agree, and we've got this included in that new member packet, and apologies, and was hoping to get that entire packet out in advance with the agenda, with a lot of other key documents, our planning framework, to really ground members in. So yes, we will definitely get this sent out within that new member packet. And then, I was thinking about, should we take this on towards the end of the year to fully update it? Maybe we form a small subgroup type thing of SFAC members to help us fully update the charter.
One thing I'm not clear about, you mentioned that the SBAC charter might be revision to reflect more than the Northwest area. Did I get that right? How would that be reworked?
You want to
Yes,
talk about the geographical changes?
We're 3 areas of, there's Northwest, the southern area, which is basically Western Maine to the California border, and the east side. And so our thought was to expand the scope and bring in reps and conversations around our project, management activities in those places as well. I believe Cheryl is part of that. So Cheryl is from Southwest and kind of representing that region currently. So we're already in process.
We're just missing an east side,
Yeah.
at least on this one.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean, but I guess I assumed, since Cheryl was on, that we're, bringing in the south. Yes.
Yeah, we just haven't put it into full implementation or update. The charter's been updated, but it's still draft, and you guys haven't reviewed it yet.
Yes.
I just have a question. I haven't looked at the charter in a while. And so are we as the SFAC, the authoritative body that initiates and approves amendments or changes to the charter? Or is that something done directly by the department, the service of the department?
My recollection is correct, Justin, if you remember chime in, it's our authority. We still retain the authority there, because that puts you in a clear advisory role. And that way we're able to sort of frame it up the way we think we need it.
So we, seeking input from us.
Yeah.
I think it's so fast, but
Yeah.
ultimately there's no vote required to amend it or update it, just to be clear on the timeline and expectations.
Yeah, let me double check that, but that was my understanding, yes.
Okay, the next thing that is on this agenda is the public comment period. Is there anyone here from the public that wants to comment about anything, the weather? Okay, great. Then we're gonna go to Nick. Oh, sorry. Yes, Michael. Please do.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
All right, good. Just for the record, my name's Michael Lang, and I'm with Wild Salmon Center and also participate in the State Forest Coalition. And this morning, I thought it might be timely to talk about agency key performance measures. Since the FMP and the AOP are on the agenda later, there's been recent discussions at the Board of Forestry meetings about KPMs, what they are, where they came from, and who is responsible for them. And I think some of you in this room or online may have heard some of those discussions. And in particularly of interest is KPM 10 that requires 30% of the forest to be a complex layered forest structure. Since adopted in 2013 as a KPM for the agency, there hasn't been any meaningful progress towards attaining this goal. And this goal, that KPM, that requirement for that structure of 30% ties right back to the 2010 Forest Management Plan and the requirements to achieve 30 to 50% of the forest and complex layered or old forest structure. So just for background, let's look at the statutory basis for KPMs that are required by agencies and submitted to the legislature. In 2009, the legislature passed this law intended to improve agency accountability. So it requires agencies to develop key performance measures and report the progress on meeting those KPMs to the legislature and to the public. So this statute is ORS 291110, and it quite plainly explains that state agencies develop those key performance measures. They're adopted by the Board of Forestry, and then they're submitted to the legislature and tied to the legislature's legislatively approved budget. So there's a report every 2 years on agency progress. And again, the agency ODF has not made progress towards attaining this goal. I think less than 1% improvement over the last 5 years, too. So the agencies are required to make progress towards meeting these goals, meaningful progress, and report its performance on these metrics to the legislature and to the public. And I'd also say to this committee too, because it's an important metric to use to just measure how well the agency is doing. Is the agency doing what they said they were going to do in this case, in the current forest management plan? And I want to say too that plan and those KPMs still apply. And we all know that the ODF is developing a new forest management plan. That won't be adopted until later this fall, based on current scheduling. So this ties back to I'm winding this up here, so stick with me, but it ties back to the annual operations plans that are still under that 2010 current forest management plan and those key performance measures. So we'll be reviewing the AOPs through that lens. And it is our hope that the agency is accountable to doing what it said it was going to do back in the 2010 plan and how it reports to the legislature, and not have any proposed timber sales in complex layered stands or older forest structure until there's a new forest management plan in place too. So I hope I've given you some things to think about today too, and that would conclude my comments. Thank you, everyone. And thanks for your service on the committee too.
All right, thank you, Michael. Yeah, Nick.
Greg also has something from.
Yeah. I asked Nick if it was okay to read a comment on behalf of the Oregon chapter Sierra Club, wishes to see the ODF implement a measurable climate change and carbon plan, which coincides with the governor's executive order of 2526. ODF should set aside state forest lands for carbon sequestration and at the same time manage the state forest toward a complex layered structure of 30%. And we hope that there will be some decrease or even a limit of clear cutting in the habitat conservation areas and an old growth stands adjacent to those HCAs. And last comment here is that we also hope that the ODF will commit to longer rotations between harvests for state forests. And ideally, though it's difficult, managed from an ecological perspective. Thank you for giving me that opportunity to read that.
So I just have a question and just a confirmation from what Michael said. So essentially, we haven't, the board, the big board, hasn't accepted the plan yet. That happens in the fall. So that means your AOPs still focused on the old plan and what he said is true. I mean, I don't mean to, that sounds.
We're gonna talk about it, in detail later today, sort of.
Okay,
So, yes,
oh,
John,
it's okay, go ahead.
Maybe we'll expand that.
go ahead.
Ensure we're implementing both plans.
Okay, good luck.
We're in compliance with the draft HCP,
Okay,
aligned with the draft forest management plan that's an administrative rule process adoption.
Right.
Caveat that it has to wait for the HCP to happen before that is fully adopted, while also implementing the 2010 forest management plan and the associated KPMs that derive from that. We're in a bit of a bite of the line because there are conflicting requirements between the policies and the adherence to the Endangered Species Act. So we're threading a very fine needle through there following all policies. So we'd have more latitude following one or the other. Sure. So it's a very tight rope to follow. And I think we've done a very good job doing that. But it's a delicate thing to communicate to interests. Okay, this is violating or skirting the intent of the narrative of 2010, but there's a difference, the framework for the FMPs.
So I think it was fiscal 23 when we started making that commitment, or 24. When we said, listen, we'll honor the HCP while we continue to implement our current plan. It's been taking longer, obviously, than we anticipated, and so I believe it was from FY 26 that we moved the DFC, the desired future condition complex, into the HCA's as part of this transit, into the HCP's habitat conservation areas as part of this transition. So we're still in 26 and 27 operating under both plans. We were able to align them a little better, but not entirely. I mean, all of the DFCs are aligned with the HCA's. Some plans that were previously DFC were left out of both the habitat conservation areas and this shift. Those are the subject of some sales that are of controversy in 26 and probably in 27.
And it's part of it is the trade-off, right? So we could have just continued doing our plan and not implementing the HCP early. But we decided, both in we've had a lot of conversations about that with SFAC, but also with the board. And that's where those new implementation plans came in, when we are moving our desired future condition into the HCA's. But the trade-off to that is going to make available stands that are in current condition that we are going to be harvesting as we make this transition. So we are trying to align to the new board direction. And that KPM is, yes, still there. It's not time bound. It's something that says how much we have to do every year. In the implementation plans, it says how long it will take us to reach those goals. Not specifically to those KPMs, but through our desired future condition. And that's how we kind of frame that conversation moving forward. And so one of the things that we've talked about a lot about the KPM 10 is it's one of the indicators that has said we needed to shift. We weren't getting where we needed as fast. And we changed to this policy framework of an HCP to help assist with habitat and having it in the right locations over time. So both can be true. But because of the trade-off discussion in this transition period, we are moving forward towards the HCP and that new policy direction while still, following our current forest management plan. Is just in different locations. And one of the trade-offs is that we are going to be harvesting current condition complex outside of our habitat conservation areas.
I think the afternoon, or the morning, the discussion later this morning is really focused on this quite a bit. And we'll try and show it to you visually as well. So we can continue this discussion then. One point of note, yes, we still live under that KPM. That KPM will need to change as well with this new plan, because the whole concept of a target for complex forest is replaced by the habitat conservation area commitments. And so the legislature will need to wrestle with that. We're currently talking to the board about our performance measures. Presumably some of them become KPMs, key performance measures for the legislature. Or maybe the legislature wants to see something else that more directly aligns with this KPM 10, for example. That's all live discussion.
Just to the performance measures, I mean, they're anchored into the notion of the original forest management plan of 2001. Supposed to have an accompanying HCP with it. And when the board met in Klamath Falls in 2000s, they came up with border forestry performance measures, which were just benchmarks for policy performance within the board and not the legislature. And it came up with two performance measures of note. One was beating 30%, striving towards that 30 to 40% DFC, and the other was 5 to 15% increase in economic output. So those are board performance measures, which eventually have, 30% was important in the original FMP. Was at that point, we got a free up on the landscape and we could move OFS and layered stance across the landscape when we had an HCP. We never got the accompanying HCP with that effort and went to take avoidance so nothing could march across the landscape. Another overlay that complicates this is we changed our inventory from SBS to FBS, which we had already met our goals of at least 20% complex structure. And because of the change in the inventory that reduced almost at half. Different inventory systems are good for different purposes. That change didn't help our case presenting what's actually on the forest. So that's some context behind some of these pieces, but the KPM 10 is anchored into that concept of being 30% DFC, which then triggers free up to allow management across the entire forest. The change to now to a land allocation approach with the habitat conservation plan, things won't be across the forest. Okay. So that they're apples and oranges.
Okay, thank you. I have a question just for, I just want to make sure, can everybody online hear us? Yeah, okay. Amanda?
Okay, great. Yeah, I just did a little bit of what Dan is saying, Amanda Sullivan asked her for the record. That, although there's been challenges meeting KPM 10, the other KPM that Dan's talking about on the revenue piece, KPM 5, we've also not been achieving. So there's been challenges across the KPMs. And again, I think I really appreciated Colleen's perspective and articulation of that was part of the reason or the framing and the context behind sort of moving into this HCP and the initial discussions of the board of, hey, we need a change here. It's sort of, adaptive management, if you will, right? So we saw a need for change, took the actions to get there. And that's, I think, where originally I know that there's maybe people who don't like the twin objectives, the way that things were originally framed. But I think that's why they were framed that way, because these two KPMs, one on habitat, one on revenue, one on the economics, those were the driving factors to begin with. So just want to kind of balance that conversation as it relates to, our continued discussion throughout the day, and just highlight that in addition to kind of all of this, maybe somebody at ODF can help us frame up our authority and role at SFAC in tracking those things, because at the end of the day, the way KPMs work now, to my understanding, and it's a limited understanding, but these are come from the department to the legislature. The legislature decides what they are, and they could completely agree with them, they could change them, and then it's really the legislature's role to hold the department accountable. And in a certain sense, the board is kind of accountable in a way there too, given that these are border forestry land. So maybe articulating kind of what our role is as an advisory body to the department in accounting for, understanding, thinking about the current KPMs and future KPMs as relates to our charter.
Has different spots. Well, I mean, I think, so the performance measures to go down a level from the legislatures to the board's performance measures. So if we're successful in convincing the world that this is the right way to go, we'll be able to say at the start of an IP, a 10-year implementation plan, 28, hey, look, here's where we think we're gonna get for each of these measures over the next 10 years. Does that look good? Do you have any concerns? Is there a particular metric you'd like us to adjust? Carbon or, some habitat or whatever the case may be, or harvest. And then we'll all be following that over those 10 years and reporting that. And then the adaptive management opportunity comes at the end to say, how do we do? Where did we fail? Where did we succeed? What adjustments can we make? I see SFAC playing a key role advising in that process, like tied back to the implementation plans, and looking at those performance measure outputs as well, and giving us input.
And I'll talk a little bit more about that today as we kind of get into what is the new IPs and what they're going to look like going forward. I just have a high level overview, and that's kind of some of the stuff I was going to talk about. That's really the adaptive management process. So I think, what you were right in saying that this is adaptive management without that label on it, right? So we've been doing things. There's been some concerns at some different levels on both KPMs, and now we're kind of adapting through the board to new policy that we're going to be implementing. We just transitioned that earlier to be able to give weight to both of those plans as we make that transition.
Yeah, just one more comment I want to make, Lisa, if that's okay. Sure. And I want to be very clear that I think to some people in the public, it may feel like changing the KPMs is sort of moving the goalposts, right? And I would just want to clearly articulate on the record that people feel that for both of those KPMs. So, that's real. Those are real concerns, and I want to validate, people's feelings and perspectives because they're shared in many different ways, not always on the same exact perspective, but people feel that. So that is real. I want to validate that. I want to validate the feeling. But I do think that we are headed in a direction that is better for the forest, better for the department, such that we can get the ITPs and get this over the finish line. So, it's not the plan I would have preferred, but I have grace for the situation that we're in.
Appreciate all of that. I agree. I mean, from the agency perspective, we're acutely aware that nobody is happy with our performance on those two metrics.
But you mean you're doing well?
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah. Anything else, Nick?
Are there other public comments?
Oh, yeah, we're only on public comment. Sorry. I thought we were on organizational change, but you're next. Any other public comments? We're going to move into Nick's piece on organizational changes.
Okay, so yeah, just a few things, changes on the org chart for folks to be aware of that we could talk through. First of all, I see Kate is here, and I'd like to acknowledge Kate's work over the past year plus as our interim state forester. And she is now back here in Tillamook. Thank us all. I think she's almost had catharsis and is happy about it.
Thank you, Paige. But we appreciate your work. Thank you.
Yeah, no, yes, thank you. So we have a new state forest, as I'm sure you're probably aware. Her name is Casey. That's KC with two C's actually. So KACEY, KC, the initial, which is a Nepalese I learned. And she comes from Nevada. She was the state forester there for, I think 8 years, either acting or permanent. Prior to that, she was like a, deputy state forester. Brings really great experience at the national level, both across the Association of State Foresters and engaging with the feds. And a lot of energy. She was around all last week. She's been around for a couple weeks. She started March 1st. She's been in Salem for a couple weeks. A lot of us have had interactions with her and personally been encouraged by them. So, yeah, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Kate? Go on.
I'll just, I
Not
have
to put you on the spot.
Sorry, I was late. I was talking to the city first, Casey. I'm gonna take the chance to say welcome to Casey's, she's getting up to speed, really fast here. The end of the month, she's gonna be meeting with the new director of the National Fire Service, and with the State Fire Marshal's office. Gonna be in Burns for the Rangeland Summit. And then we'll be back here for the Forest Center 20-year anniversary. So in 1 week, that's a lot of miles in Oregon for anybody. So she's back and forth. Her families, they bought a house in Oregon. They're ready to get here. Her youngest daughter's graduating from high school. So she's back and forth with Nevada. So you'll see her in and out of the state, but she's just trying to get around and to meet as many people as she can, as well as the governor's office giving the homework of how many people you have to go meet in the first 3 to 6 months. So, and then she's also got a priority of really trying to meet with the tribes, see, learn about all that as well for Oregon. I think, she's going to be brings great experience and great fit for what we're doing here. So I'll leave it with that.
Thank you. Forest Grove District Forester. So as you guys are aware, I think Mike Caferata moved on a year plus ago now. He's now, I believe, president of the Small Woodlands Association. And Eric Perkins is our successful candidate for the district forester. So Eric's here today. Him and Steph Beal actually both served in developmentals for a few months. So thanks, Steph, as well. And yeah, we're really happy to have Eric in the role. As long as we can keep him. Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I was born in Oregon. I've worked early in my career, I worked for the Forest Service, Central Oregon. Worked in private industry in Central Oregon. I've been working here for the Department of Forestry for the last 22 years up here in the northwest corner of the state. Hired by Dan and others in Astoria. I worked for Dan and Kate here in Tillamook. I spent most of that 22 years in Forest Grove, but I've worked out of 5 different offices here in the northwest corner of the state. Graduated from Oregon State in 1990, it was the early 90s, but so born and raised here in Oregon. Spent my entire adult career in forestry.
Great, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, and then finally on the org chart piece, so I think you guys know we have a federal forest restoration program. It's moved around the agency a bit, but it was up in the Forest Resources Division for a couple of years. This includes our Good Neighborhood Learning Program, and all of which has been expanding quite a bit in the past decade. As they've been doing more and more sales, we in State Forest, they've been using our contracting processes. We've been actually putting those sales up for auction. It just started to make more sense to move the program down into the State Forest Division. So starting January 1st, that move was made. It doesn't change much in the field, but the three Salem positions are now in the state forest. So Kyle Sullivan is the lead for the Federal Forest Restoration Program. He's now a direct report to Mike Wilson. Harold Stevens, who worked here on the district for a while, he's been around. He was on the district. He is now the sort of operations coordinator in Salem for the federal program. And we have a vacant NRS3 environmental coordinator who will do probably some of the deeper work that we are we're in the process of hiring. It's been interesting. It's like, oh man, we got a whole nother program all of a sudden, and we don't have any more staff per se. I mean, the field staff exists, but like for Salem to take it on has been more work than we thought it was going to be. But excited about it. Makes a lot of sense. There's some efficiencies there. So, for example, we'll talk about financial strategies in a bit, but a bunch of the Salem State Forest staff that have a good chunk of their duties now sort of designated towards federal forests. We took 10 or 12 of us, and 15% of our funding is now coming from that federal forest program, which offsets some of the FDF costs of forest defense, forest development fund. So that's that. I think it's kind of exciting, kind of overwhelming, but good overall. And I think it just it's going to help the field staff, I think, in the long run, just to get us all aligned on contract administration, sale administration, etc. Before Mike.
Yeah, quick question. I mean, appreciate the update here. I'm wondering, is there going to be like an updated org chart at some point in time, which I know are dangerous because typically as soon as we hit print on those, they're kind of outdated right away. But if the state forest program kind of develops that, if we could get a copy of that out to state or the SFAC members, it'd be useful.
Yeah, I believe we have one already. So yes, we'll get that out to guys. Also, while I was talking, Colleen pointed out that Chelsea Peters turned into North Cascade.
Over here.
District forester, and I forgot to mention her. So welcome Chelsea, everybody as well. She's now the district forester for the St. James.
And maybe if we could she do the same little intro that Eric?
Sure. Okay. Yes, so Chelsea Peters from the Cascade District Forester, 18 years with the agency. I wasn't born in Oregon, Eric, that's for a while. But graduated from Oregon State, worked out of Tillamook for a long time, worked out of all programs, protections, forests, and forest resources. So yeah, excited for the new adventure. Congratulations. Thank you.
Other questions? Next on.
Money.
Oh. You're still going broke. Just kidding. Sort of. So, okay. We figured we'd spend a little time, Kevin and I kind of walking through. First, I'll walk through sort of what are the things that we've been doing to seek cost savings, budget savings. And then Kevin will kind of talk about where we're at in terms of markets and sales and the budget, the revenue projections. Where do I go? So I think it was back in 24 that we established the financial strategies work group. That was a bunch of staff from various specialties, staff in the field. just to sort of go through, you know, it's our intent there is to keep that group going through time, but, it's always good to look for efficiencies and business practices, right? And with our tight budgets and our decreased harvest over the last couple of years, became even more important to do so. So kind of everybody sat down and just listed out little things. I think there was like 70 different items that came up along the way. And it was everything from small, well within our span of control to really big and outside our span of control, and rising to the level of the legislature. We put as much of that was within our span of control into practice. And last year, we were able to save a few $1 million through that approach relative to our projected budget or actual payment. I forget Kevin now, but it's maybe 4.
It was 2.4 million less than the year prior, but it was well under what we budgeted for.
Yeah, very good. There were some pretty significant savings there. It's still not quite enough, as you'll see when Kevin starts talking, well through our projections. However, I thought I'd just kind of walk through what are all the things we've been doing. Part of the reason for this is because what it gets to is what are all the things we're not doing anymore as a function of trying to save money. So kind of first and foremost, the easiest and biggest ticket item is just holding vacancies. So we, across the division, the districts and in Salem have been holding about 10% in each office vacant. That's had some information, you know, where you are, what the workload is, obviously. That's not ideal, however, it's becoming the new norm. And so we're not intending very slowly reviewing each of those positions and making determinations whether they have to be filled or not. Trying to hold as many of them as we can for as long as we can. The field has been working really hard to tighten our timber harvest planning, both the planning team as well, the Halloween shop, and the district operations coordinators have just been taking really hard looks at sales and seeking efficiencies there, sale layout. And in the project work associated with it. So we've been also lowering project work, trying to keep it to what's necessary for the sale itself. Although if there's savings that are found and sort of an investment now for future operations, then we definitely take that into consideration. Again, that's kind of the roads unit, the planning unit in the field, working through those discussions. Pretty big thing we did was we turned off all of our vehicle replacement. So, it's odd, but you buy a vehicle and then you continue paying for the next vehicle. And so when you're ready to buy that new vehicle, that money's there. But you're always kind of buying the next vehicle. And as Don framed it, it's like, you know, if you don't have enough money to buy a new car, you drive the car you have. So we made a decision to turn off the vehicle replacement. We're not paying into it right now. That's okay. We'll be able to like figure that out over the long run. It does mean we're, you know, kind of driving goods into the ground right now as much as we can. The bio unit and district staff work together to kind of reduce some of the survey effort for owls and murrelets where they could. Some of that was just like buffering off so that it wouldn't trigger the surveys. And then for owls, we had been covering just all of the habitat using this like density approach where it's like just survey everything and then you have some sale flexibility. We narrowed that on a bunch of districts just down to the sales that we have planned. That saved a few $100K over that year, or at least a couple hundred, I believe. So it wasn't insignificant. We're still looking hard at that and desperate to kind of move past the survey program with the HCP. Took a really hard look at our standards for stock. Vanessa says we saved 400K. So it's not insignificant. We took a hard look at our stocking surveys. So how much effort are we spending going out and determining how successful our reforestation effort is? And then how often are we going back in to interplant if we're determining that we're deficient? Kind of what scale? How are we defining deficiency? So is it if any given acre doesn't meet FPA, or is it if the whole stand doesn't meet FPA? Like what are we responding to? Trying to to our staff's credit, they're really diligent about filling those holes. Keep trying to keep production as high as it can be. It comes at a cost. Taking a hard look at that. We sold a lot of our surplus seed that we realized we probably didn't need on hand, and then we also looked hard at how we are collecting seed. So we had a lot of seed, and we're still collecting more every year. It all comes at a cost, and so again, we sort of changed how we're collecting seeds at the orchard when there's a surplus, and then we John Walter and others did a lot of work looking at cooler and freezer locations. Found some saving. They ended up saving $450K last year just by making some of those adjustments. Point here being, we're taking really hard looks at everything across our whole program, and then we're making hard decisions. We're making people do things differently from how they're used to doing it, and doing less overall. We've been deferring any PCT work, any pre-commercial thinning, unless it's grant funded, which we did receive a grant for $190K last year. So we have been doing some PCT, but it's otherwise deferred if we don't have grant funds. What other good news? A couple other things. Looking hard at our planting densities as well, not just the stocking surveys, but actually what are we planting, and do we need to be planting as dense? Do we need to be as intensive in our young span management activities, or can we get to the same goal in some places while still doing less, or while doing a lot less? Another big one is trash removal. So that problem has gotten worse on the state forest over time. And we advised everybody to limit how much removal they're doing unless it represents really clear public safety or environmental hazard. So if it's a vehicle in the creek, let's get it out of there, right? If it's hypodermic needles at an RV site, let's figure that out. But we're not out there. Like, we generally use work order contracts to get everything removed every year, and we're not in some cases. That does real impacts over time. It's not something we can keep up forever. Similarly, we are not building new trails from the Forest Development Fund or from our OHV lottery dollars, with the exception of outing problematic trails. So we're really limiting how many new trails we're building, and it's limited essentially to grants funded or volunteer-led efforts right now. The agency is not. They can't address that properly. Right. We're also limiting travel, training, equipment to the extent we can. We're telling people, like, use your laptop as long as you can. Don't replace that tablet if you don't need to.
Nick, just a quick clarification. That one sentence. OHV dollars they're not lottery funds, or they're not more OPRD funds. They're OHV user funds.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yes, funding and gas tax.
Yeah, thanks. I'm being like, we're not using state monies right now. It's probably the proper way to say it, other than grant funds. We saw some savings. I forget the specifics for some reason, because there's been too many legislative items in the mix, but there was a recalculation of protection rates that benefited us directly, state forest lands, to the tune of about $900K in savings from our previous rate costs. We are looking at pops. I can't talk about them yet in detail, but we do have a number of pops that we're gonna try and bring forward. Sorry, policy option packages for the legislature. So those are essentially budget requests. We anticipate that harvest levels, if we get this HCP and FMP and given the current modeling, we anticipate that they will bump up again. Not as high as we've been cutting for the last 10 years, but higher than we have for the last couple. So if we wind up, we think we're gonna wind up above 200, I'll say just sort of conservatively, and we're currently down at about 185. So there'll be some increased revenue there in period, et cetera. And that's it. So we're continuing to do all those things as we see like that, that yielded, as Kevin said, quite a bit of savings. It's hard. It comes with real costs. It's not sustainable. And we're aware of that, hence the POPs discussion, the policy option packages. Which in and of themselves won't fix everything either. So we still have, we're doing everything we can to get as close as we can to, solvency, so to speak.
The top question is, it's hard to kind of get your head around at first, but it is important to point out that those are extra tops. And so you go ask for some this top, and it's a top in a figurative sense also. You still go back and ask for it again and again. These are extra asks. Sometimes the legislature says, look, I'm tired of hearing from you. Quit coming to me with these tops. You're not getting it. If they're not happy, they're not part of the base budget. So they're handy, but they're not something you can rely on.
I'll make
one cover.
I'll make one up because this is not what we're asking, but we could ask for, say, 10 million next biennium to fund our REI program. And we might get that, but then we'd have to go back. So that's not a long-term fix. Okay, that's the nature of it could be a question.
So does anyone have any questions about these changes or modifications to? I have two questions, actually. One is, if you're holding the vacancies, obviously, if you hold them for too long, then they're no longer in your budget. So how long is that hold for?
Let's place around.
Yeah. Well,
And it's a question we have on the budget chart. So we're looking this year and have doesn't answer your question, but we are reducing our limitation based on our limitations being high based on where we've been actuals. And we're not doing it via those vacancies, which eventually maybe you would if you have to, but we're trying to hold the line on that for as long as we can. So we're looking at our service supplies and our other budget line items that we could get them down to.
and then the other thing that would worry me is the garbage issue. And and I'll have to go back to the president of my archery club, but we were supposed to do a cleaning this month and it was canceled. And I'm not sure who canceled it. It wasn't us. So I think that that's something that recreational groups can participate in and help you with. And, I hope you reach out or whatever, maybe we need to take that on. But that, we all know that will become a really bad problem. Way too long.
Just a quick follow-up on that. A good example, and Ben, you'll have to correct me, but I believe actually tomorrow, we have a group that we work with, Trash No Lands. It's actually heading out to one of our one shooting range on Potomac State Forest, Wolf Creek. And so, kind of your point, it is extremely important for our group to be working with, or for our program, working with groups that do care about the landscape because we don't have, I'll talk about the staffing, Nick mentioned roughly 10%, well, the RNF program was a 27% vacancy. So, it is a tough thing for us with those groups and working on MOUs, and I'll talk about partnerships when I talk a little bit later, but we also have to make sure that we are doing that appropriately to limit risk in my state. So it's kind of a double pronged issue.
I know it doesn't, it helps you, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't come with work.
Yeah.
I mean,
Piece I'd add to that, Nick, is that just within the state forest division, we only have so much control about our total overall expenses. Government costs, wildfire costs have risen logarithmically over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
We used to pay $1 an acre for fire protection. Last year, with the admin pass through, in addition to paying 100%, we paid $5.50 an acre for fire protection. In addition to ever increasing admin prorate costs in Salem.
Yeah.
With that passage of House Bill 3940, that headquarters services pass through, the pass through to state forests removed, which is about that 900K savings you're talking about, which is the protection division's share of the admin prorate. Additionally to that, with the development of the wildfire fund, rather than going to the ESCC, the Oregon Forest Site Protection Fund, those rates continue to go down, which should keep our rates at a much more palatable and stay very steady. So the legislator did a lot of work, and the agency did a lot of work to bring that to fruition. Passage of 3940, it's really good work. And that was good communication between divisions about what's equitable. So that was a great agency lift to work on that, and then the benefits also goes to them. I think you're going to see more of that into the future because we can only control what we control. When we start saying we're going to fix this by not picking up that pile of garbage, that's really not going to fix it. We've got to look at those overall cost centers and find a more bankable way.
Yeah.
State forests and stay solvent.
So some context there. I think we spent 42 or something last year. 10 million of that is those transfers that go out the door that we have no control over. Our share of the revenue generated was pretty close to our actual operating costs. So the division, I mean, if you ignore, you can't ignore those other things, like you can't pretend they don't exist, right? But the division on its own almost pencils out I asked, I'm sorry for saying that, but we cover our own costs in revenue.
Just to add on to the garbage discussion, because Stephanie Beal's been working on, unfortunately, we get people that drive probably stolen vehicles out in the forest and light them on fire to get rid of their fingerprints, I guess, I don't know. But we don't just leave them right there on the side of the road, right where they're at. We've been stockpiling them, if you will, not hauling them away to someone that will take them, but putting them in an area where when we do move them out of the forest, they're in a consolidated area and we can move multiple vehicles at the same time. And Steph, if I missed anything there, jump in, please.
No, I think you characterized it. Our problem with disposal right now is we don't have any companies that are willing to come and get them. The Portland side of the hill is overwhelmed with abandoned vehicles and RVs because of the unhoused population. So until I can find a licensed, reputable business willing to come and take them, we are accumulating them up behind a gate out of sight of the public.
Thank you, Steph.
Yes, that's what.
Let's see, Mike, that is.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Nick, for the update. A lot of these things that I've been scribbling down here in notes that you've mentioned are there's a trade-off to a lot of these things. Sooner or later, the vehicle will break down and you're going to have to replace it, and you need to have the funds to do that. And vacancy savings are a strategy that's been used by every state agency and public agency for a long time, but those all represent trade-offs. I think the next time we visit this, I'd kind of like to think about what it looks like or what your projections are for moving forward in terms of how we address staffing levels and some of these infrastructure things to keep the wheels on the bus moving forward here too. But all these things that you've mentioned here today, some of them are just efficiency things that I think, anytime you can get grant funding to help out on some of these programs, I think is useful. But really kind of having what's the picture look like moving forward, a decade from now, 5 years from now, even on some of these things, I think would be useful. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
That, I think I just want to amplify, but I think it's Mike's point. The department typically has been very proud of being able to fix things, clean up. That's dumped on them. I just encourage you to continue to find graphical, clear ways to communicate the costs that are accumulating here. You're not just solving this problem, you're storing it over here, you're accumulating these deficits. It should be understood as real deficits to legislators and people in this conversation. You're not just solving the problem. These are costs that are accumulating. People of Oregon are going to have to pick up at some point in the future. So don't be afraid to be communicating that all the time.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch too on and kind of ask the question maybe that Mike hit on the trade-offs for the staffing piece. From the operator perspective, we are very proud to work alongside ODF and ODF staff who are really experts in the field of forest operations and forest management. The vacancies that arise aren't always the places that are the most efficient for them to be, or the places where you would otherwise maybe want to cut staffing levels, just based on, you're just kind of dealing with where they pop up, right? So I think there's a challenge there, and it'd be really interesting to know what your strategy is on kind of working together with staff to try to manipulate those positions or get people cross-trained into places that maybe there's a vacancy, but just what that looks like, I think would be really interesting. And I'd be acutely interested in that as it relates to customer service for the folks that I represent and continuing to deliver the quality product that you guys do as it relates to putting out timber sales, coordinating the sale administration pieces of the work, doing the appraisals and whatnot. So I'd be keenly interested in that. As well as just thinking about the, just like the staff morale, again, to the trade-offs piece, you have these vacancies open that work is done, right? It just gets done by somebody else who has other work that they're already doing. So, I just want to be very sensitive to that. It is a common strategy. Most of the time, agencies are over capacity or not necessarily right sized for the work to begin with. But again, I know that those vacancies are not always in the right places. So it's talking about people's lives, people's livelihoods here, but there is an impact on the work and the customer service that the folks I represent get. So knowing kind of what your strategy is there in the long term to like how you guys are thinking about that would be, I think, really important. For me and my members.
Yeah. And I do think, again, because I do want to get Kevin to go over some of the projections there, and as well as Cody around where we're at currently with market conditions, et cetera. But that would be a good future agenda topic, especially given the our ability to speak to future policy option packages, et cetera. You know, inherently within the division, just as was said, there's only so much we can do internally. But ultimately, us as an executive team are talking about, you know, what can the division do within their sphere of control? And then ultimately, as an ODF, what is the agency going to do to help support and navigate the future cross program, right? And I do think that would be a great topic to even get some feedback and input on. You know, I feel like moving the federal forest restoration program is a step down that direction. But ultimately there'll be other aspects to it as well. So, you know, a huge tie to the fire program also.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've been using the number of 15 in the offices just in Northwest Oregon. We're holding 15 positions vacant. That's 15 less firefighters with qualifications who could stay home so others can go. Like it's that whole thing is just kind of builds on itself, and that's an agency issue. And we're trying to work through all of those aspects of it. So I think that's a note that I'm taking that we can present here in the future. So I imagine Kevin's got some items he wants to share.
Can I pigtail on your comment there? It's even more than 15 less firefighters because the people that are at home have less of an opportunity to go out. So it compounds there.
Well, this is a conversation we need to have with the legislature. Mike Wilson, division chief, is really going to be focusing a lot on this over the next year. Because I'm not sure how many folks in the legislature understand that relationship there. And if our funding is such that we have to reduce positions even further, then that has those spillover effects to fire as well. And so like the agency tries to fall together. I'm making that clear.
Yeah, and I guess just one follow-up on that, you know, I mean, I don't want to be facetious here, but I mean, the kind of the challenges around the finances are in some way self-imposed. I mean, you know, you guys produce your own revenue. So, you know, it's not like I wouldn't say that the legislature is going to come and save you because the legislature and the governor are looking at significant downfalls as well. So, I mean, you know, so I think we need to get creative around how we produce more competitive sales, you know, how we do things differently as well to increase that revenue. I think you need to get creative, and I'm sure you guys are. I don't want to make it sound like you guys aren't trying to get creative as well. But just thinking about how we can do things more efficiently, integrate technology, integrate innovation to be more efficient and effective, squeezing that dollar for as much juice as it's worth. So I just want to highlight that. I mean, the volumes are going to be the volumes. And so, yeah, I mean, I just want to be like very clear about that like the legislature isn't necessarily our savior here.
Yeah, but it's like Tony likes to say, hope is not a strategy.
Yeah.
So yeah, 100%. That conversation has to happen though, as part of an all points strategy, right? So I guess, and as Don said, we are looking hard at cross divisional equities within the agency that we can control. We're looking at not necessarily additional requests, but redistribution of existing dollars, things like that.
Thank you. So I'll start out talking about just market conditions, where they are now, where they have been. As you see, we're currently $490 per MBF on our sold stumpage to date. That's right nestled in with our 10 and 5 year average. As you see, we had a big jump about FY 21 and then another jump into FY 22. We've stayed in the mid to high 500s, peaking in FY 24. And it's worth noting that this time last year, sold stumpage was at $423 per thousand, and we ended the year at 522. So there's still a lot of year left, and we had 3 timber sales yesterday, and we'll have 2 more today. Yesterday, all 3 timber sales received over $600 for the winning bid, with one out of Western Lane going for $747 per thousand, about a 75% bid up, and it has. So we're seeing strong market conditions. We have 2 more sales today out of Forest Grove. So we always see strong prices out of there. It's very possible at the end of the day that the number today will be over 500. I would expect I know Cody's going to talk about AOP, but we've got a lot of volume coming out of Astoria and Forest Grove in the fourth quarter, probably about 35 to 40 million board feet. I think it's very likely we'll be right around our 5-year average by the end of the fiscal year. Kind of on that topic, if we go to the next page, looking at no bid sales, we haven't seen any alarming trends in terms of no bid sales. 5 to 6 seems to be the high watermark for an AOP. So far this year, we're at 1. And those never really come as a big surprise. There's usually external factors, small bidding pool, a tough location, a lot of project work. I know out of Astoria, for example, we had a sale with a heck of a lot of spruce that just wasn't able to sell, and it'll be remarketed and hopefully sell again here soon. But what we haven't seen is purchasers indicating any sort of, hey, the price you're charging for Douglas fir is just too high. We haven't seen that. So there's no real alarm in any sort of no bids that we're seeing.
Can I ask you about what percentage of that 6 is there? How many we have? I mean, how does that represent the whole year?
About 45 sales in an AOP, is that correct?
But it's the volume and value versus the number.
Sure.
Our sale was like 2.5 million feet. Our average harvest is 52 million.
Sure, I understand that, but because he's showing us it in this way.
Yeah.
Maybe it's better to do it in board feet.
I can check it.
Okay.
Get back on the volume.
I forget what happened to. So by comparison, I think they had a lot more in the great percentage, which is a different, an indicator of a different environment. Klamath Lake, it's worth, I'm pretty sure those are all pulp sales. Those are like lodge pulp sales. They're not money makers. So it's not necessarily surprising.
Maybe a better way to look at it. I mean, I don't mean to, but is value versus annual value. Because those were 6 harvests that were incredible value, that would be a bummer, but it's there. Because that is 6 out of 46. That's sort of significant.
I would also add too that when one goes no bid from the district, it's not like the end of the road. We come back and feedback from the purchasers, what can we change? Maybe we reappraise it down a little bit and it goes back up for auction in a month or 2 later.
If we go to the next slide, we'll look at the revenue projection. And one note for this is a metric we keep a close eye on is what we call volume under contract. So as of right now, as of our last invoice run, we had about 290 million feet under contract. That's up from where we were in FY 24 and 25 in the 270 to 275 range. It's the highest since FY 23. And we expect those sales that we know sold at a good price based on our first slide. We expect an increase in volume at a very strong stumpage price. And you see that in the revenue projection. I know it's a little small, zoom in, but we do see FY 26 a projected loss of $10.4 million with only 88 million in total revenue. But then we see that jump in FY 27 and 28 to 114 to 120 million dollars in total revenue. And we see that NOI drop to negative 1.9 and negative 500,000. But It's also worth looking back to FY 22 is where we really started seeing revenue drop and that NOI really carve into the FDFs. We had -5.5 million, -8 million, -6.8 million, -7.5 million. That's how we've gotten in the situation we are now. But we do see that sort of leveling off in the next 6 to 18 months, I would say.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time figuring out what's the y-axis here? Is that years or is that what I'm?
Yeah, so we go back to
Okay, so 2015 is on the left and 2028 is on the right.
Yes.
And that's projection where they're.
Correct. And you see there FY 24 to 25 is where we really started hitting the cost containment measures. So we saw total expenses drop from 44.3 million to 41.9 million.
Nice.
And we projected 43.5 million for FY 26. It looks like it's going to be more like 42.5 billion once the year's wrapped up. And then we do expect, if we can continue current service level, for budgets to increase about $1 million a year, just to stay in line with inflation.
And it does, we said so that top line is the total revenue, right? And then the green is the county shares portion of that, and the blue is the ODF's portion at the 36% split. And then the red is the ODF costs.
Expenses.
You want blue to be correct.
Right, right. You want everything to be.
You want, yeah.
Right.
Kevin, what assumptions are you making of the harvest levels that show that bump at the end?
Yeah, we got a couple pages down, we show harvest levels. Really what that is timber sale contracts coming to an end, and that hauling has to come through at some point. So we see a bump in there, and on the last page of the projection, it shows what we project harvest levels at. So it's 182 million board feet for FY 26. And then it's a jump to 226 million board feet and 237 million board feet. So that's a big jump. That's more than we've seen lately. Every short-term cash analysis we do quarterly, has continued to show that this is coming. But it is a big assumption, considering our financial situation, that if that volume doesn't come through and we stay in the 180, 190 range, we could see those big negative NOI years continue.
That's all on contract, isn't it?
It is.
So thanks. A question back up at the graph. I guess they're all like graphs, but in line. For like especially looking at the projected.
Yeah.
Are those like the NOI in particular, like is that cumulative or is that just on an annual basis?
That's on an annual basis.
Okay, so the projection is that over the next 3 years or, through 2028, that the NOI would be negative, what is that? 113 or 13 million?
Yes.
Way different. Yeah, so 13 million over that period.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So just trying to understand how that.
Yeah, and it could be worth to show one graph down is where we project the FDF balance to be. Currently, it's sitting at about $11 million. We entered the year at $21.8 million. You would expect to be right around that negative 10.4 by the time the year ends, but we do see it level off and not quite hitting zero by the beginning of FY 29. But again, that's very dependent on what volumes.
Does this, sorry for the questions, but does this factor in, so this just factors in the cost of the sale? And remind me, do you guys mostly sell scaled sales and it's and they're not escalated? So the price doesn't change.
Correct, it's fixed in the contract.
Fixed, yeah. Okay, so that's helpful because I was just thinking about the increased logging costs, because every year logging costs go up, and so all that does, so that doesn't really do anything for you guys, but it does on the timber purchaser side, their revenue decreases. So just thinking about all of the, wrapping around to all of the economics of this work, as that happens, things get challenging as well for the private.
So play into that too, though. I mean,
Yeah,
since stumpage values go down.
that's true.
Yeah, that's right, because I always question the stumpage values.
Yeah, I guess the point is that our costs never.
Right.
Most of their represent. So what they get paid maybe stays equal, which is changing on the small business.
That's all I had to think unless you had anything to add on this question.
So, I just wanted to, get that out there in front of everybody's eyes. And then open for discussion. And we are running behind it. So
Yeah, we're about 20 minutes.
catch up.
So Cody,
Yeah, Jody, if you could pull up my presentation, appreciate it. Yeah, so once again, Cody Valencia, I work out of the West Oregon District, and I'm gonna be taking you guys through a quarter by quarter look at where we're at for fiscal year 26. And like I said, we'll kind of go quarter by quarter, so if there's any questions for that quarter at the end of the slide, feel free to just raise your hand or call out and we'll try and get those answered.
actually, can I just ask a question? Can you tell me again what NOI is?
Net operating income.
Thank you.
I always want to say that was 10, but that's another aspect of my life.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's jump into the first quarter. So as you can see here, we planned for 7 sales for the first quarter of the fiscal year. 2 of those shown in orange were moved to the second quarter as they were completed just a little bit later than the end of the first quarter. We also have 2 sales that were submitted at the beginning of this fiscal year that were fiscal year 25 holdovers. And those sales are counted towards the fiscal 25 volume numbers, not 26. We show them here mainly to acknowledge that these were prepared during the same time frame to show workloads. And finally, there is 1 salvage sale that was not originally anticipated in the North Cascade District. At the bottom, it can be seen at the end of the first quarter, we accomplished approximately 86 of our anticipated sales and 9% completed for the year. Questions on the first quarter? Okay, moving on to the second quarter. So there were originally 12 sales planned in the second quarter, plus 2 that came from the first quarter. So 11 of those 14 sales were completed within this quarter, with 3 moving to the next quarter. One thing to note here is that the end of the second quarter is when we got some heavy winter storms, particularly affecting the Tillamook and North Cascade districts. And so there's a kind of an increased load and access issues with there. And at the bottom of this, you can see at the end of the second quarter, we're still at 85% accomplished for our quarter for the anticipated sales and jumping up to 30% for the year. Questions on the second quarter? Sweet. Going into the third quarter. So that's where we're at today for the third quarter. So this one, as you can see, is a lot more busy. So first thing of note is up in Astoria. There's 1 sale that was due to size was split into 2 separate sales. And those are the 2 highlighted in yellow. Forest Grove has mainly caught up with and are buttoning up their last sale on the list for this quarter. Tillamook had a couple sales they're putting the finishing touches on. They should be able to get zigzag done easily by the end of this month with, Saudis. I think is how they're pronouncing it, we'll see. Either squeaking in at the end of the month or rolling over into the fourth quarter. West Oregon's finished, their sales, and then Western Lane had a bit of a shift, where they had 2 sales drop and moved 1 sale up. This was mostly due, to needing to wait for an adjacent landowner to log, their parcel. So we had access, to the sales for them. And then finally, Klamath had some movement where we dropped a sale, we moved an alternate up, and then we moved that alternate to quarter 4. And so kind of where we're at now, you can see there's still a few sales, one in Astoria and one in Forest Grove that does not have a prepared volume, there yet. Those will get filled in as the cruises are finalized. Most of the work is done on these sales. But even without those, you can see we're slightly over the prepared volume for this quarter, as several sales were bumped from the previous quarter. And if you look, once we get those last 2 in, we should be a little bit over 100% for the volume prepared to date for the year. One item to note on this screen is in the Tillamook Cook Creek overlook sale. This one was highly affected by markets dropping, and had some difficult logging and fairly low value timber. We're still having discussions on the viability of the sale and what kind of changes we might want to make with that. And that is all for quarter 3.
For those, Western Lane, kind of full content for those high value sales.
No, they're just in a really good market. They have the Eugene markets and also kind of that southern Medford area. So they have a pretty competitive bidding. And so, yeah, yesterday, 2 sales that Western Lane sold, I think they both had 5.2 million and 5.7. One went for 747, one went for 740. So they typically get pretty good sales, but they typically don't have quotes.
So kind of in the weeds, but it's just large wood that's probably going to handle.
Yeah, I would assume some of it is a little bit bigger with always being the purchaser on that.
Thanks.
I do want to know, when we say dropped in minutes, that doesn't necessarily mean they'll never get done. We usually just roll those into another sale plans. Some of those sales are moved from the plan, or they just get put back in the mix candidates for future options. But all of them.
One request that I might make is, if we could add the acres onto this spreadsheet too. I brought this up in the past, volume is great for our members, but a lot of times I want to know kind of what the volume per acre is and what the acres are. That relates to the quantity of work for our members in a different way than volume does too. So anyways, it'd be a nice additional metric to be included on a table like this.
Get that in my face. So we'll definitely, the plan is to have this each SFAC agenda, just so we're staying up to date throughout, so you guys know everywhere.
If there's no other questions, we'll look into the future for fourth quarter. Some of you, as you can see, some of these sales have already started layout. Nothing's been completed, but we've started progress on that. The biggest workload for this quarter is mainly going to be on the Forest Grove district with 3 sales. But at this stage, we believe all those will be done within the fiscal year. So in summary, we're slightly behind on some of the sales, just barely, but we're catching up and we plan to be on track and finish all the sales that are in this. Any questions on any of the quarters? All right, well, thank you for your time.
You have a break right now.
Yeah.
We're behind a little bit, so
That's okay, I can make it. Okay.
So do we have 15 minutes? Okay, so please be back by 11.
I'm gonna leave the room for those of you that are online, but we'll be right back. Online, we're just waiting.
My God.
All right, so we are at the 10:45 point, even though we are really at 11. And it's gonna be Nick again. Nick, you're up again, and you're gonna talk about, forest management plan and habitat conservation plan updates.
Sure. So this first piece is just kind of checking in on where we're at with both documents and what the timeline looks like at this point. And then in the second piece, I'm gonna kind of compare and contrast the old FMP to the new one a little bit. And then we're gonna show you guys what that looks like on the landscape as well, and kind of what it takes to drill down to a few acres for harvest with all the various considerations. So, I guess we'll start HCP, probably a little easier. Fish and Wildlife Service is working on their biological opinion, so NOAA's the lead. So they run the NEPA process with the environmental impact statement, and then Fish and Wildlife Service issues a biological opinion on that work, and then in theory, hopefully issues us incidental take permits. So they're working through their biop, and we've been doing like walkthroughs with them for a couple months now with all of their staff. Kind of going line by line through the existing draft of the HCP. Just making a bunch of edits. And we're hoping to turn that back around into a draft by May 1st. It's getting tight now, but it's gonna be somewhere around there. The discussions we're having right now, we're not making substantive changes to the commitments. For the most part, it's really just kind of clarifying, intent in various sections and kind of adding supporting info where needed for their effects. It's going well. It's just really tedious conversations. Given all of that, they're thinking that they may take till October or the fall, they're saying, for incidental take permit issuance. NOAA, on the other hand, is sort of out in front of all of that, and so they're almost ready to issue their final environmental impact statement. They're just waiting for this final draft that we're about to put it forward. So that they can kind of check the boxes that there's been no significant changes and move it to issuing the final. Given all of that, they may end up issuing their incidental take permits in front of the Fish and Wildlife Service, which is a little unusual. It's not unprecedented. But usually they issue it all together. The EIS comes out with the record of decision, the incidental take permits. Since they're out in front, they may just issue their permit as early as June. Talking kind of June, July permit issuance with NOAA and kind of September, October with Fish and Wildlife Service. Assuming everything goes well. Then on the forest management plan, the public comment period that we just had ended January 30th. Many of you may have seen, we brought more info to the board in March at the March meeting. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. We kind of in November, we had framed up some sort of harvest scenarios for them to consider within the sort of framework of the HCP, kind of like, hey, you have this much decision space. They had given us some kind of recommendations for where they wanted to go, not as like clearly or emphatically as we would have liked. But given that, we brought back a harvest approach that reflected all the discussions we've had and some model derived outputs for some of the performance measures. That was March. They didn't really give us much to go with there, except kind of, yeah, we keep hearing like, you're kind of on the right track. We kind of like to change some things. We're not sure what yet. But that's fine. We're continuing to work with them kind of in individual conversations and we made a bunch of revisions now to reflect those public comments that we heard in the last session and reflect what we heard from the board. And also importantly, to kind of more explicitly link the plan to the board's vision for Oregon's forests, which kind of came out since we've been working on this thing. The climate change and carbon plan, we're just trying to make sure that we're sort of pointing to it in all the right places. And to a lesser extent, the new executive order from the governor's office, which directs state agencies to take certain actions for like resilience and conservation. It's hard to really hardwire an executive order into a 70-year forest management plan because executive orders come and go. So we're trying to take the intent there and meet the intent without necessarily saying we're following the executive order. So working on all that, the intent then is to bring that draft to the board, this updated draft to the board in June. And then we intend to initiate final rule at that point, which then opens up another 90-day public comment period, leading into a September board meeting where we hope to get their approval for the plan, for the forest management plan. Now, you just heard me say the HCP, that state permits are coming at different times, and one of them sounds like might trail behind that board meeting. So the discussion we've been having with the board is that approval of this new plan would be contingent on incidental take permit issuance effective fiscal 28. So that's how we're trying to address the uncertainty there. That's what's going on. Take questions. You look thoughtful.
I was thinking about the executive order comment there. Then if I wanted to, I could make hay with your, when you characterize that. I don't, I know what you mean. I know what you mean, and I agree with everything you said, but I just wanted to give you a chance to elaborate. I think what you're saying is you're not going to endeavor to ensconce the executive order in law, in statute, in basically in the 70-year process, because that it's just not a good fit for an executive order. You know, you can't really go and say, well, you don't want to say we're following the executive order. But that'd be a very easy quote to take out of context and have fun with you.
I mean, we have.
I'm just
yeah, no, it's like tactics.
My ear is maybe off, but it's why not bring that up now instead of in the new year.
I should use a thick card. We are we're directed to follow the executive order. Right? We're having conversations with the governor's office about what that means and how to do that. And our intent is that the FMP reflects those conversations and reflects the specific, recommendations within the executive order. It's just given the ephemeral nature of executive orders, it's hard to explicitly put that EO in, and then it becomes irrelevant somewhere down the road, right? But the ideas are irrelevant.
And where we can make the connection, because our carbon and climate change plan will reflect, we'll get updated with whatever comes out of the direction that we get on the new executive order. And then we can also connect to everything for explicitly because it's a shorter term plans. So as we go through getting our direction, we'll figure out what the right fit is at our different planning levels. So that way we're implementing what we're required to implement, we're connecting where our policies or editing our policies and our EMPs to align with them. But those are the better documents to connect to that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it might be, interesting, maybe at our next meeting, if we can think about the agenda and including Tim to talk about the work around attributes, because there's, we have the executive order, but there's so much work to implement and define what they mean in reality for the agencies. So it's almost like the timing is challenging, I think, for us. I would contend that it's not that the plan doesn't meet the intent of the executive orders, but the details are still being worked out, right? And so it's hard to say right now, make that direct connection because there's still things being worked out as far as the implementation, right? So I think we'll see in the end that it's very much so aligned with the goals and objectives. But there's just so much work happening internal right now between the agencies to define, what is resiliency, what are those attributes, et cetera, et cetera. So
That's key because many of those translate or don't to our performance measures. So there's a real discussion there for the board too, in terms of how closely are some of these measures that we want to adopt, or do we feel like we have adequate surrogates? So, I'll give an example though too. So there's a buzzword going around based on the order called co-benefits. Is how everything's being framed these days in terms of sort of when we take an action that it's benefiting multiple kind of resources of consideration. That's what we do. So we're like, it's bringing that concept into the plan isn't very hard because we already do it. It's just about how do we bring it in at the right level? And so that's one of the things.
great to see how much.
I was just thinking to myself, and I was talking to Don a moment ago. It's a good thing that this, maybe a packet will be going out to the new SFAC members, because Nick, if I were new now and I just listened to what you said, I'd say, what the hell? A lot of new stuff that's going over my head. Yeah, no, that's why I'm glad that this idea of a packet coming out in the future is a good thing. Because, what you talk about, you have to be very technical, and it's good that it'll be good for SFAC members to kind of get familiar with this language and the acronyms and what have you.
Yeah, and I think it's too bad it's still very drafty because there is some intent there. It's let's get folks properly oriented to the guideposts that we follow.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this last conversation? Anyone online? Okay. Move to, well, you again. Show, man. Okay. So we have pictures, which are nice.
Yeah. So we really wanted to take a moment and and this speaks directly to some of Michael's concerns that he expressed earlier. Hopefully it's still on the line. Just kind of take a moment and talk about what is this new plan, sort of what, at a really high level. And more importantly, kind of what are the differences between the two plans? Kind of the three of us just kind of cobbled these slides together this week, right up until yesterday evening. So they're not exactly polished, but I think it's fine. It's just going to lend to a discussion. Some of you have seen this a bunch of times. I'm trying to be the other version. So the FMP, right, it's got 4 chapters. First chapter is just an intro, which describes the purpose and scope of the plan. It includes the guiding principles, which are, it's important to clarify because we had the public input period. We heard some things that suggested folks don't understand the guiding principles are for the development of the plan. It's a little bit of a nuance. It's not for our management of the forest. The guiding principles just are for the plan's development. So anyway, they're in there, sort of characterizing the lands that are governed by the plan. There's an important piece in there talking about how this plan relates to our other plans and processes. And that makes me feel it's and then there's the major plan themes that I'll talk about. So that's chapter 1. Chapter 2 has the management approach, which is sort of a vision for how the management of resources is integrated across the landscape to sustainably deliver diverse benefits to Oregonians. Chapter 3 is kind of the meat, and it has the description of current conditions for each forest resource to provide context for managing those resources, and then it has the goals and strategies for each resource and the intent of those goals. And chapter 4 is just kind of the general guidelines for our asset management, for the plan's implementation and provision, and for adaptive management and public engagement. We're actively working now, like heard a lot of feedback from the public, like the connections between documents aren't clear and kind of where are you accountable, trying to flesh that out a little bit better in chapter 4, hopefully successfully. So, I'll try and give a really high level overview of what chapter 2, the management approach, says. And like I said, it's intended to provide a vision for what management will look like across the forest and what the public will see on the landscape when they come on the forest. Pretty high level. It's, really tied to what is our approach to achieving greatest permanent value and to address these other major plan themes. Those themes are sustainability. An important point there is that it includes providing sustainable and predictable flow of timber and revenue to the state, to counties and local taxing districts. Next theme is climate change, and the emphasis there is really on promoting resilient forests. And it has been since we first drafted it, and this is an example since then, the board's vision and the executive order both speak very heavily about the importance of resilient forests. We're kind of already there. Engagement with all Oregonians. And there's a specific focus there on improving our tribal engagement and sort of fleshing out what shared stewardship would look like. And then adaptive management, which is, how we test new ideas and adjust to changing conditions. So the intent of this chapter isn't really like the how-to guide for what to do in the field. That's more in the goals and strategies. It's in the HDP. It's in our policies. It's in the implementation plans. This isn't the how-to. It's more what's the landscape context and addresses how different areas are managed for different objectives. And the forest as a whole provides for that, robust expression of greatest permanent value. Kind of some important themes, other sub themes, I suppose, or concepts that the management approach is really rooted in are it's framed around providing ecosystem services, and ecosystem services include everything from timber and jobs in the woods to salmon runs, carbon storage, old forests, recreation, all these things that we want out of GPV and from the forest are in fact ecosystem services. So we're kind of framing it that way. And then also I'm promoting resilient forests, as I said, for uncertainty. So that those two themes run throughout the document very frequently. The framework of ecologically sustainable management is also rooted in this idea that healthy and productive ecosystems provide for the long-term sustainable provision of all those ecosystem services. Inherent in that are concepts of, diversity, complexity, integrity, and we manage for those at multiple scales in different ways in different places. And it's also rooted in this concept of reciprocity between people and the ecosystems that we live in. And so it's the basic concept that we nurture the land and the land nurtures. Yeah. So we're gonna, we frame all of that within the forest land management classification system. And so we could probably take a few minutes to explain that and how things differ on the landscape. So, the strategies to increase resilience to climate change or other disturbances and the trade-offs that we consider are going to vary on the landscape depending on the specific emphasis of a particular area as designated either by the forest management plan or the other plans that support its implementation, such as the HCP and other laws and policies, right? So the HCP establishes these habitat conservation areas and these riparian conservation areas. And now we're translating that into our forest land management classification system. Forest land management classification system, which is my least favorite acronym. It's defined in Oregon Administrative Rule. It's a method of describing the management emphasis of parcels of state forest land and the appropriate range of management activities that will apply to a particular area of the land base. It also identifies particular resources that may need a more focused approach or possibly exclusive priority. This information is then used to develop our implementation plans and during operations planning. And then a few important points around that or around those different areas. And so some of you have heard me say this before, but I'll state, and this is no surprise to any of us here, but timber revenue funds the vast majority of our management activities. It's also the primary vehicle for providing those economic benefits to rural communities. And therefore, emphasis on production-oriented goals and related silvicultural strategies will take priority on a significant portion of the landscape through time. This portion of the landscape is our general stewardship ground, and we'll show that on a map soon. And so production of timber will be the primary objective on general stewardship lands, with consideration of the long-term sustainability of the timber resource. And that's where resilience, when we talk about resilience in these areas, it's applying to that timber resource primarily. But it's important to note that these lands are also provided for other ecosystem services, such as clean water, carbon storage, and wildlife habitat. Focused stewardship lands are places where specific resources require heightened or focused awareness, as I said before, and the management strategies there are designed to maintain and protect these resources. Examples include cultural resource and recreation sites. And then there's high value conservation areas. These are managed for specific use, and management activities are limited to those, these are managed for specific conservation value. The habitat conservation areas and riparian conservation areas under the HCP will become high value, will be designated as high value conservation areas under this classification system. And then special use, these are just areas of kind of exclusive use for a specific type, and the Tillamook Forest Center and utility rights of ways are examples. There's specific areas of social emphasis too. So we have kind of this concept evolving now of kind of economic, social, and environmental emphasis areas. And there's a social emphasis piece too there, like recreation trails, campgrounds. At the same time, the REI program is really interwoven across the whole landscape, across all these emphasis areas. And the differences among the emphasis areas really provide for the diversity of recreational experiences, activities that we can provide. What else? I think that's all I'm going to say about that for now. Go into, okay. So that's like the quickest overview I've done so far, man. Totally inadequate, but it's okay.
We are going to go through a mapping exercise just to kind of show these different stewardship areas and emphasis areas, kind of how we use them in planning and how we give them consideration. But Nick's going to go through kind of the comparisons of plans first, so you can have both in the back of mind before we look at the landscape level.
Colleen gave me some caveats here.
Lots of caveats here.
At very high level, generalizes some of the major changes in order to simplify the comparison, give a general sense. Specific requirements are nuanced and may differ from what's shown here exactly. Okay, so I think folks are aware, on the left side here, you've got our current plan requirements for various like resources or topics of consideration. Right side, you have what it would look like under the new forest management plan, which is tied to the HCP commitments. And so, start with weed tree strategies. This is both weed trees and snags as well as downwood are addressed in both plans. Our current plan, the standard is 5 trees per acre, but that's allowed to be averaged either across an AOP or across some part of the landscape in consideration. So what that means is it's 5 trees per acre, but not every harvest unit is going to meet that. Other harvest units may exceed it. Across the suite of sales, you're going to average 5 trees. It allows for stream buffers to count, certain types of stream buffers to count. That's always been kind of a point of contention amongst our biologists and our foresters, kind of how much and to what extent we count those things. Are we over exceeding our weed trees? Are we not meeting the intent of the biological intent, open debate. And 2 hard snags per acre across the landscape. Again, that's sort of the average, the scale for the metric is the landscape. So contrast that with the new FMP, the requirement is 2 trees per acre. However, riparian buffers don't count, and that is on the per sale unit basis. You want to hit that number. It's quite a big change for our foresters to adapt to from the way they've thought about weed trees in the past. And so we're going through those adjustments now. It also requires 2 hard snags per acre, just like the old plan. The downwood requirements are similar. The emphasis for the lead trees is a little bit of a nuance, but it's important. It's not hardwired, but it's sort of this notion of biggest and best. So when you're selecting your lead trees, you want them to be kind of large or old, or to have important structural features for wildlife. And then also capture some of that stand level diversity at the same time. So, if you were to compare the two, if you calculate the actual number of trees, it actually ends up being a little bit fewer trees per acre required. It's not quite 2, it's more like 4.7 or something. But most of them are coming from, it's not all coming from the extent that it used to be. Okay, this next one is
Besides that.
good question. And do you want to talk about?
Battery sites.
Yeah.
So we have a pretty involved process for doing lead tree design. So as we develop candidates, the district staff, our biologists, look at those units and determine what are all the lead tree considerations. So last year we put into our AOP pre-op reports lead tree considerations. So you can have a lot of different lead tree considerations. You can have the largest, biggest, and best areas. You can have slow areas that we have to protect and we want to put green trees there. We could have domestic water where we want to add additional lead trees in those areas. You can have safety issues, roads, or, there's a whole variety of considerations that we have to do. And then during sale layout, the biologists and the districts will work together to formulate a plan of what are the priorities for that any given unit and work together to kind of map out where those are going to be across the landscape, taking into consideration all those things plus the operational considerations, and then come up with a plan and implement it. And then we meet every quarter to just kind of go over how are things working? What have we learned? Do we need to make any adjustments? Are we doing it consistently? And kind of that's how we approach it generally.
Collaboratively, and Vanessa's on the line. I don't know if you want to add to that, but we've been conducting a series of workshops, internal workshops, to try and build alignment on both what we're looking for and how that process should play. Okay, this next piece is pretty important. This speaks directly to what Michael was speaking to earlier today. And so under the current plan, we have this desired future condition complex target. It's technically 30 to 50% of the landscape at the district scale. Each district has different targets, and we've generally for a long time now been down towards the lower end. Some districts are almost exactly 30%. The average across all the districts right now, 35%. And that represents about 214,000 acres that are in that designation, desired future condition related to forest structure. And that is where the key performance measure for the legislature is derived from here. And so we're supposed to get to that percent. And as Dan sort of outlined, we're depending on what metric you're using, we're not there. And that's been a point of real criticism for a long time. And we have terrestrial anchors under this plan framework. And so, that DFC was allowed to shift across the landscape. We have these anchors that are sort of embedded in it, and they're intended to sit a little bit longer, although they can also be moved through time. And then sort of the focus was on structural characteristics, old forest structure. It wasn't old forest per se. It wasn't old forest. It was young forest with the characteristics of old forest. Under the new FMP, because of the commitments in the habitat conservation plan, we established these habitat conservation areas. Those habitat conservation areas represent 43% of the total land basis, riparian buffers aside, about 260,000 acres total, built largely around historic and current occupancy patterns for the species in the HCP, but also existing habitat, all of which correlates a lot with desired future condition area or with current condition complex. So the vast majority of our current complex stands went into the habitat conservation areas. We'll need to add a little bit to show that well, but that's a really important point that like when we're talking about DFC and HCA's, there's a lot of overlap there. The commitments under the new plan are bigger than the commitments under the previous plan. And the commitment therein is to grow it to mature forest. So it's a big difference too. We're not talking about it's old forest structure and young stands. We're saying it's old forest. In addition to those things, management therein, as opposed to developing those structural characteristics, it's really on habitat for the common species. Again, there's a lot of overlap there, but there's some nuances. It's not quite apples to apples when you're comparing structure and habitat for species X. In addition to those conservation commitments in the HCA's, the habitat conservation areas, we have dispersal habitat for spotted owls outside of, in that harvest matrix, in that production emphasis. You still have to maintain a certain amount in dispersal capable condition. So the framework here is you're really laying down this long-term conservation commitment for high quality old forest in these habitat conservation areas at a larger scale than we do under the current plan. And you're also providing for a functional landscape in between those.
I think one thing to note here is I wrote management focus on developing habitat. That actually is developing and maintaining habitat. Or stands can grow to be very complex, but then as we get additional density, as those grow bigger, they can stagnate and then go out of habitat as well. And so it's not just about developing habitat. You'll see places where we're being really strategic and maintaining habitat as well when it's right on that kind of cusp. So there's a lot of opportunities inside the HCA's.
So then on the aquatics side, comparing the buffers under the current plan versus the buffers under the HCP and the new plan, similar but some differences. Generally, the new plan affords greater protection, particularly for non-fish streams. And I don't know if I want to say, a couple important points. The buffers under the current plan, we only say it's no cut within the first 25 feet, and then you can do thinning or other activities to the rest of the buffer. Under the HCP, you're basically saying there's no harvest in that entire buffer. Not without, like there are scenarios where you can, but you have to do it in consultation with the services. In any case, big difference there between establishing a buffer and allowing it to be thinned, and for better or worse, establishing one and not. And then the tight bands are slightly larger. Important point here too is we use horizontal distance, not slope distance. So again, it's a nuance, but horizontal distance is generally longer, or ends up being longer than the actual number that you're saying. So if you're going 35 feet horizontal on that slope, it ends up being more like 50. That's farther. And the process protection zone is some additional protection on the first 500 feet of type of non-fish stream. So when you're coming off of a fish stream onto a non-fish, you actually give those first 500 feet a bigger buffer. Those are all pretty substantial changes, actually, that sort of incremental achievements, or improvements, but very tangible.
One thing to note here, and we get a lot of questions about domestic waters, or the domestic streams that have water rights on them, and they get these same buffers, which are higher than our forest practices. Or they meet or exceed our forest
Each slide there. One is the percentage for HCA's. It's a little misleading. If you incorporate the RCA acres with that for Astoria, we're at 52%.
Yeah, no,
So those, that's half the force, so look at 35, 52.
It's that,
But the other point I just bring out is, we talked about, which was planned, we're implementing both. So it's duly covered.
so you, right, correct and important to point out, I did at the top, like the 42, just buffers. I think Cody's rationale there was because our buffers are essentially the same, so my difference is, so that sort is probably 51% with today's buffers, and maybe 52% with tomorrow's buffers.
yeah, there's no great answer to it. We don't have all the temperature protection zone pieces mapped out at such small scale. They're everywhere. It could be greater than 50% once we figure them all out.
Yeah, there are some areas where it's a lot.
And I will say there is, with those temperature protection zones, there are some operational challenges for those just because of where they lay on the district or on the terrain. And so it's something that we're working through in our planning processes, sale by sale. I think the other thing to note here too is if we didn't include the operational limited data on this, and that changes depending the current forest management plan double counted a little bit more than our current or the future each case. There's just acres on landscape in off limited that we will be considering.
Let's go to the next one. I'll try and move over. Conscious of time.
Hey Nick, can I just ask a quick question? So in 2023, I kind of Colleen just mentioned the stewardship agreement that was passed as kind of ODF landowner with ODF board, pairing up and recognizing that although the stream protections and protections that are under the new FMP are different than the PFA, but there is alignment there on the intent and benefit to the species, and the intent is the same there. One question that I have is, I haven't looked at that agreement, I just pulled it up, but I haven't looked at it like in depth in a while. But there's a lot of stuff happening as it relates to the PFA and private lands and the Forest Practices Act as well. How long is that agreement there for? Like, is it indefinitely there? Does it have to be updated? What happens as we do things in adaptive management under the Forest Practices Act? Whether that be adding restrictions or even removing restrictions, as we see that some of these kind of politically developed buffers were not necessarily scientifically developed.
I saw Justin pop on. So Justin, if you're there, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I can answer. I think I heard two questions in there. One was the time length. That was drafted to coincide with the term of the HCP. So those are intended to go together. The FMP, the HCP, and the stewardship agreement, all kind of have similar lifespan intentions there. The agreement, however, it's voluntary. We can walk away from it. The board can also make a choice to withdraw those protections. So it's not a definite thing, but that's the term that's written into the agreement currently. On the second point, or the second question around what happens as the FPA changes, that's actually one of the benefits of having a stewardship agreement is regulatory certainty. So as the PFA or the adaptive management program contemplated by the PFA makes changes to that, they wouldn't necessarily have any impact to state forests as long as it's impacting only those rule sets that we have covered by the stewardship agreement. So riparian buffers are covered by the stewardship agreement. So any changes to the FPA with respect to those buffers isn't going to have a direct impact on state forests. The board can always opt to make a different choice there, even with the stewardship agreement in place. So, but the intention would be that, we would follow what's codified there and agreed upon, sort of regardless of what happens with the Forest Practices Act.
Thanks, Justin.
Mhm.
Okay, a couple of important topics too. So how does our road system, how does our REI program change? Current plan, we basically brought all of the standards for both from the current plan into the HCP. And then in negotiating with the services, ended up with some other requirements. So for roads, it has additional requirements for a transportation system assessment that identifies any problematic areas and goes and repairs each of those. It's kind of consistent with how we do things anyway, frankly. We always address things we see, but this formalizes that. Similarly, if you're in a riparian conservation area or a habitat conservation area, you're just gonna you sort of assessing whether you actually need to be there. Is that the most economically feasible way or operationally feasible way? Like, is that where you have to be? And then if so, kind of how can you minimize impacts to habitat therein? There's some more restrictive requirements on stream crossings in RCAs that Eric Moberly can speak to if we need to. And then some increased limitations on interhauling, like restrictions on interhauling. It's not prohibited, it just has some additional considerations. Likewise, really similarly for trails, kind of same process. Go out there, assess your trail system, correct any things that need to be corrected. When there really aren't limitations there aren't restricted. So there are limitations for trail building within the HCAs and the RCAs, but we built this app based on the work that we think we would need to do over the next 30 years. So did I characterize that right? So there's upper caps on it. I think it's like 600 miles of trail that can be built. And that's about as much as we anticipate ever building time.
Yeah, it's a net also. So if we are making trails that actually ends up adding that total that could be built in that period. So just a net addition of 600 miles, which we'll talk about later today.
Yeah.
We'll not be building 600.
Yes. So when the steep trail limits, we're not saying you can't build any trails. There's sort of an upper cap to maximum amount. There are some considerations. So again, stream crossings. I'm not sure if we had an active owl pair. We have these 250 acre cores. I'm not sure we would build an OHV trail through that owl core, but it's not explicitly prohibited. And so again, just, sort of assessing conditions, some limitations on what we do in winter, sort of shifting it up to ridgeline work in winter. That's about it.
Well, one other additional for REI, it does also have limitations on our facilities too. So there's the cap on the amount of facilities that could be built just across the landscape, and also has limitations on what sorts of facilities can be built within different areas. Kind of go back to those 4 different types of classified lands. So.
Okay, and then for the other resources in the plan, we just kind of frame it up this way. For the most part, there really aren't significant changes between the current plan strategies and the new plan strategies for these resources. Some exceptions are carbon, which really there is no formal plan or program for carbon in the current plan. We're storing carbon, it's a byproduct of our actions, like we're net sink, but it's not intentional. the new plan sort of, addresses carbon explicitly. We haven't, I think we're gonna end up saying be a sink, continue to be a sink, but that hasn't been like codified yet. But it formalizes carbon as a resource for goals and strategies. And then for the cultural and historic pieces, we really, Cindy Kolomichuk, who is now our tribal liaison, she worked really closely with the 9 federally recognized tribes to develop the language and plan for the cultural strategies and goals. And so it reflects this like increased level of access, engagement, acknowledgement. And then what else? Oh, so on the wildlife side too, obviously big change. Current plan, we live under take avoidance, which means that we survey for listed species and listed species only. Which kind of puts us in a scenario where we're either chasing, I might have a show of this, we're either chasing timber sales around the landscape, making sure there's no birds there, or we're chasing birds that we actually find around the landscape and they're messing with our landscape design in unintended ways. Contrast that to incidental take permits. We, for one, I think we spent like 2.6 this year or 2.4 on T&E surveys for owls and murrelets only. Under the HCP, we kind of fixed and that goes up every year. So when we started the HCP, that number was 1.8 million, and it's now 2.4 because we made some cost decreases. Thank you. Okay. So under the HCP, our monitoring program is fixed at about 2 million plus inflation. So we already would see some savings in the program, and then that money is focused on a broader base. So we'll be spending less and getting a bigger bang for our buck there for the species, because then we're also doing real species monitoring rather than just chasing timber sales. Most of that monitoring will occur in conservation areas. Some of it will be spread out, but it's not tied to the sale program. So a sale doesn't need surveys to be clear. That's really important because that gives us a lot greater planning certainty and operational flexibility to kind of move around. And you said a couple things yesterday that I forget.
I think you're good. I think he's.
But so it gives us more, I mean, that's the whole incentive here, other than the legal risk, there's those operational benefits. And so that's the big difference between those two in our approach to the endangered.
And click on those monitoring and survey are significant. We talked about them being significant. Are those forecasts in the expense line through 2028 and not counting on the HCP?
Correct, yeah,
Giving us that money.
yeah, we just project actual expenses with inflation report, and that's usually very accurate.
So an HCP is going to change that expense curve then.
It would, theoretically, yeah.
Does that take into account the bar owl mitigation costs, conservation fund?
So assume it doesn't go to zero, but I mean, it's going to be significant.
I don't want to overwhelm with all that because you know how everything goes to, like, we'll end up with some unexpected cost increase somewhere. But in theory, on paper, we still save.
I guess so. I would call the question: do you think it's wise to talk about the HCP as saving costs in this area, or better stop talking about that? Or
I mean, that was always the intent. That's in the business case. It didn't play out as we intended. I will say, although it's not playing out for other folks. So like Washington DNR, when they got their HCP in 1995, they didn't have any monitoring requirements for these species. They had only habitat requirements. We kind of went in hoping to wind up in the same place and really quickly the service. Now, you need to demonstrate the efficacy of the program. because they've learned lessons from DNR's program on its shortcomings. And DNR ultimately had to build backs for programs. So we had thought maybe we don't have a survey program. We do. We're able to hold its costs to sort of dictate what it looks like, rather like, as I said, just tying it to our sale program and letting the powers that be determine our fate. So I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say, I get your point, like, but if you're saying the HCP has all these great cost savings and you're actually losing money and harvesting less.
I'm just talking about this one, this one category of expense. If it's likely to be a wash, if I got other money obligations anyway, it'd be better to talk about this, like, sale development and processing and management efficiency. Yeah, just, but cumbersome.
That is the primary driver. The secondary benefit is we might, at the very least, not be subject to ever increases in costs. Because we basically said, this is how much effort we're going to throw at these. I think that's it for the piece. Oh, quickly to next slide. Just to give you a sense of all the different like emphasis areas or resources that influence those forest land management classification subclasses. Which you will see some of that when we do our little visual exercise. You have something else to say about these?
I just wanted us to get a sense of what they were and see what they are before we do the GIS.
It's noon. It's technically we're scheduled for lunch at noon. So I guess choice there. We want to run through this exercise before lunch or we want to wait until after?
Thank you.
Be inclined to push through, but I don't want to see. Oh.
He's gonna check and see. I can do the implementation plan too when I do that. I can focus on this. Get us out of here as well. I can make a comment. I just kind of had that in.
Commissioner Banks is on. Do we want to say hello to her? Or Commissioner Banks, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Morning, welcome to our group. And I think we should do an introduction. Is that all right with you? Would you like to begin? Okay, would you like to begin?
Certainly. Clatsop County Commissioner Courtney Bangs. I'm just excited to be able to join you guys. Thank you so much.
I'll start over here. Lisa, hi, I'm from Astoria. I represent non-motorized recreational use.
Rick Jacob, environmental representative.
Anna Sullivan Astor, Associate Oregon Loggers, representing operators, and was voted in today as the new vice chair.
And Barrett Brown, represent motorized recreation and other recreation interests before us.
Lisa Phipps, representing conservation interests.
Joe Offer, Recreation Education Interpretation Program Manager for the agency.
Don Everingham, Northwest Oregon Area Director and co-convener of SFAC.
Hi, Courtney. I'm Colleen Kaiser. I'm the Planning Operations Manager for State Forests. State Forest.
Hey, Commissioner Banks, Nick Palazzo, Deputy Chief of State Forest.
Ty Koppel, Voice of Cascade.
Cody Valencia, State Forest Unit Forester for the West Oregon District.
Good morning, I'm Eric Perkins, District Forester in Forest Grove.
I am Kevin Austin, the business team leader in Salem State Forests.
Hey, Courtney.
You guys?
I'm Ben Burns, I'm the Recreation Facilities Manager.
Chelsea Peters, North Cascade District Forester. Virginia Fuller, State Forest, Chester, Oregon.
Jamal Red, interim recreational trail plan. Next down, General District Operations Coordinator.
There, Kyle Cobb, San Antonio Forester, North Cascade District, India.
And then we have other people online as well. You're gonna get tested on this afterwards, Courtney. Susan, you wanna begin?
Sure, I'm Susan Knutson Obermeyer, and I'm not affiliated, and I'm from Oak Ridge.
Mike?
Hello, Mike Tody. I'm with the Oregon Hunters Association and Recreation Representative on SFAC.
Is Cheryl and Leslie still there?
Leslie's still here.
Well, it was just that things were out of place. My cup was broken. I'll get you a new one.
Dan.
On track.
Dan, yeah.
Sorry.
Leslie,
You were the first one in this morning.
and Dan,
I thought so. I just stepped out to get some air.
that's us. Anyway, I guess that's it. That'll be it. Anyone else wanna shout out your name? Go for it, please.
Yeah, I unmuted myself to say that Margaret Magruder left some big shoes to fill. So welcome, Courtney. I'm Cheryl from Southern Oregon and Ivy Frog. Do some wildfire resiliency work down here.
Afternoon, everyone. Jeff Peck, Marketing Unit Forester on the Forest Grove District.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Chet Beeling. I work out of the Western Lane District representing state forest land, Lane County and to the south of here.
Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. Welcome, Courtney. I guess we're gonna go to lunch.
Say what, sharp, is that what, or does it say?
How about in 40 minutes?
Oh,
Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. It's not like it's great weather out there. Thank you.
Makes sense. We have to choke right after that.
Right. What are you talking about? I'm not talking my dog.
Yeah.